Armstrong? And the jurors not wearing their coats and jackets, they would have air conditioning. Ranger Armstrong, I'm sure you're aware you're still under.
Yes, Your Honor.
Mr. Hermes, I believe you were still conducting your direct examination.
Absolutely.
Ranger Armstrong. Let's go back. Can you tell the members of the jury a little bit about you, where you grew up?
Yes, sir. So I grew up in Indianapolis, Indiana. My father, he retired from the federal government, and we made a series of moves around the country every time he promoted, and I ended up graduating high school in Jacksonville, Florida.
And did you go to college?
I did.
And where did you go to college?
I went to college at Baylor University in Waco.
And after graduating college, ultimately did you join the Department of Public Safety?
Yes, I did.
And when did you join DPS, Texas Department of Public Safety, DPS for short?
That was in October of 2002.
And what does a trooper recruit go through to become a law enforcement member of the Texas Highway Patrol and Department of Public Safety?
So we went through a 6-month academy where we were housed at the academy at the headquarters in Austin. We would be there from Sunday night till Friday evening, and we would go through a series of classroom exercises based on the penal code, the criminal code of procedure, the health and safety code, the traffic code. We'd also go through training of firearms, driving, arrest and control techniques, search warrants, arrest, search, and seizure, and a myriad of other subjects that would prepare you for being a police officer on the road.
And once you graduate from the academy, you're a member of the Texas Highway Patrol, is that correct?
That's correct.
You're a Trooper 1?
Yes, sir.
Right. And where was your first assignment?
It was in Cleburne, which is just southwest of Fort Worth, and the county is Johnson County.
And what are your duties as a trooper with the Texas Highway Patrol?
So our primary duties were to work traffic patrol on the highways, any U.S. or state highway, all the back roads, county roads, city streets. But our main focus was to enforce traffic laws on those rural highways, to work accidents that happened outside of the city limits, and also to assist the local city and county law enforcement that was there.
And in the course of your duties, was it, as you said, you sometimes had to assist local law enforcement? Would they need assistance, especially in the outlying counties like Johnson County and things like that, with arresting violent felons and things like that?
Yes.
Eventually, did you become a member of the SWAT team?
I did.
And can you tell the members of the jury how DPS has, what a SWAT team is with the Department of Public Safety, and what kind of training you get to be on the SWAT team?
Sure. So in October of 2007, I went through selection for our SWAT team. At that time, it was a collateral duty team, which means that you had your main job as a trooper on the road, and then we also did SWAT part-time. SWAT stands for Special Weapons and Tactics. And we were trained for high-risk warrant services, to do dignitary protection, and also to respond to active shooter situations, hostage rescue situations, and barricaded person. During that selection, you go through a myriad of mental and physical exercises to test how you'll react, or how closely you will react, how you will react under stress. And
I'm getting into the Ranger's background and qualifications. He's a lead investigator on this case.
Well, I don't think we need a recitation of every class. So your objection is sustained.
As a member of the SWAT team, you were trained and had to deal with dynamic, rapidly evolving, tense, stressful encounters with suspects, correct?
Absolutely.
Eventually, did you apply for and become accepted with the Texas Rangers?
I did.
And what are the Texas Rangers?
Texas Rangers, the lead criminal investigative agency for the state of Texas.
And what kind of, how do the Texas Rangers get involved in the criminal investigation normally?
It's very similar to how we would assist local agencies as troopers. Some smaller agencies in the rural areas may not have the manpower, the resources, or the experience to conduct investigations, and so they will ask us to assist us in either taking over the entire investigation or supplementing their investigators in order to come to a conclusion.
And when did you join the Texas Rangers?
December of 2011,
And where were you assigned?
here in Garland, Dallas County.
That's Company B.
Yes, it is.
And how many Rangers are assigned to Garland?
4.
And what is your rank within the Department of Public Safety? Is it the sergeant?
Yes, I'm sergeant.
And since your time with the Texas Rangers, have you assisted with investigations or been on the lead investigator of multiple homicide cases?
Yes, I have.
And have you been assisted with the investigation or been the lead investigator with many officer-involved shooting investigations?
Yes, I have.
And as a Texas Ranger, are you trained with all aspects of crime scene investigation, interrogation, everything that you need to be equipped to adequately investigate these cases?
I am.
Ranger Armstrong, how did you get involved in the case that we're here for involving Amber Guyger?
On September 7th, we were requested to assist with the investigation initially from Dallas PD Chief Renee Hall.
And this incident occurred on the evening of September 6th.
That's correct.
And what time about approximately were you notified that y'all were being asked to assist Dallas Police Department?
It was a little after noon on September the 7th, that Friday.
And is it unusual, like you said earlier, it's not unusual for for the Rangers to be called to assist with local law enforcement, correct?
That's correct.
Now, you normally worked with Dallas Police Department on officer-involved shootings.
No, sir, this is the first one in our history as far as I'm aware of.
At some point on September 7th, did it change from assisting Dallas Police Department to the Rangers, and particularly you, are going to be the lead investigators on this case?
Yes, it did.
And so there's from arriving at the scene shortly after an incident occurs and joining a day later, correct?
Absolutely.
Did you have to play catch up?
Yes.
And what did you do to get caught up on and familiar with the aspects of this case?
So the first thing I did was I responded to Dallas PD headquarters here in downtown Dallas. I met with Detective Eddie Ibarra and Detective Dale Richardson because they were the lead investigators from their special investigative unit at that time on this investigation. I needed to learn as much information about the incident as possible and as quickly as possible, so I knew what direction our follow-up investigation needed to take. At that same time, the other rangers that were assisting me, I sent them to the scene so they would be able to get eyes on what I was learning about, and we would be able to communicate back and forth what they're seeing and what we may need to do in order to bring about drawing all the information that we needed to draw from the scene and the information that the detectives from Dallas were relaying to me.
Had you worked with Detective Ibarra before?
I had.
Homicides or other cases?
Yes.
And were you able to review body cam footage?
I was.
Did you listen to the 911 call?
I did.
May I approach her?
Yes.
Source of the case. May I approach the witnesses?
Yes.
Ranger Armstrong, I'm going to show you some photos, make sure they accurately. Defendant's Exhibit 29 is a still photo from one of the body cams that shows another officer in the position of his body cam. Does that fairly and accurately represent a still shot from one of the body cam photos?
Yes, it does.
And Defendant's Exhibits 30 and 31 are from that officer's body cam, and 32. Does that fairly and accurately depict still shots from one of the body cam videos?
Yes, it does.
I'll offer Defendant's Exhibits 29 through 32. Intros, and the others just to show the position of his body.
No objections, Judge.
They're all reviewed.
Up here, Ranger Armstrong. I'm going to show you a series of photos that were taken of apartment 1478 and ask you if those fairly and accurately represent the scene. This was, after CPR and paramedics had come in and Dallas police came in and took photos.
Yes, they do.
This time I'd offer Defendant's Exhibits 33 through 36.
You're all reviewed as well.
And finally, I want to show you two pictures of apartment 1378. And ask you if that fairly and accurately depicts photos from apartment 1378.
Yes, it does.
And this time I'll offer Defendant's Exhibits 37 and 38.
No objection.
They're all admitted also.
So Ranger Armstrong, when you started looking at this case, were you, did you want to see, Miss Guyger lived at the time in the same apartment complex as Mr. John at the Southside Flats, correct?
That's correct.
And Miss Guyger lived in apartment 1378 and Mr. John lived in 1478.
That's correct.
The shooting occurred. Miss Guyger walked into 1478 and shot Mr. John in his apartment, correct?
That's correct.
Did you want to compare look at 1478 and 1378, just to compare the layouts? And for 1478, it's a crime scene, and 1378 is important to see if it was similar or not to 1478.
Yes, that's accurate.
So this is the first body cam still shot I showed. This is Officer Zachary Boudreaux with the Dallas Police Department. And does that appear to be affixed to his torso, a body camera?
Yes, it does.
And Defendant's Exhibit 31, this is from Officer Boudreaux's body cam that's affixed to his torso. And that's, is that a fair and accurate depiction of a view from the doorway?
Yes, it is.
And just looking at the scene, just describe what you found of value in apartment 1478 as far as deciding where the shooting occurred and where Mr. John was located.
Of interest, it would be hard to see from the distance, but there's 2 shell casings that I observed. Basically, in the kitchen, in front of the dishwasher.
And Ranger Armstrong, I don't know if that video is showing. I think you can draw it. That might not be activated. Was that? Let me do it. My friend, was it in this one casing by the water bottle, and then another casing back here in the kitchen area?
Yes, sir. That's where they were.
And then as we look in, we see some blood on the floor right there. Was that, as we see in the body cams, was that where Mr. John's torso, about where below his armpit would have been?
Yes, sir. That's correct.
And those flip-flops that are on the floor, was that about where his feet were when he was lying on the floor?
Yes, sir.
And this is just another perspective from the doorway, looking into the apartment from the viewpoint of Officer Boudreaux's body cam, understanding the visual limitations of body cam footage.
Yes, sir.
Defendant's Exhibit 36, does that show a clear view of the flip-flops and then the position of where below Mr. John's armpit where he'd been laying on the floor?
Yes, it does.
Was there ever any evidence of blood that was collected from the couch area?
No, sir, there was not.
Was there ever any evidence of blood that was collected from the floor area below the couch?
No, sir, there was not.
The focal point of the blood, was it all on the ground where Mr. John's torso was?
Yes.
These AirPods that are on the floor there, when we see the body cam footage, they're right by each ear of Mr. John, correct?
Correct. They were, from my recollection, as he was lying on his back during the life-saving measures.
Judge, objection, not responsive.
So, below his earlobes, the AirPods appeared to be directly below them, which indicated to me that they had fallen from his ears whenever he fell.
I want to show you Defendant's Exhibit 37. And is that the apartment of Amber Guyger?
Yes, sir.
Was the layout of the apartments exactly the same?
Yes.
And was Ms. Guyger's TV in the same position as Mr. John's TV?
Yes.
And was Ms. Guyger's couch in the same position as Mr. John's couch?
Yes.
With regard to the Southside Flats apartments, did you go there on a number of occasions?
I did.
And would you characterize it, or was it a confusing layout in that each floors mirrored each other's almost identical?
That's accurate.
Describe to the jurors what your findings were on how the garages floors were labeled or laid out, and what visual indicators you had as to what floor you were on.
Okay. So the first time I went there, I had the parking garage design and layout had been described to me, so I had formulated what I thought I would expect to see. I expected to see a parking garage labeled kind of like.
I'm going to object again to non-responsive.
Describe, Ranger Armstrong, the first time you went, how you encountered the parking garage and what visual indicators you had to indicate what floor you were on when you were going to that apartment complex.
The first time I arrived at the apartment complex, there were no clear, obvious visual signs showing what level you were on. As I went to the crime scene on follow-up days, I found that there were small.
I'm going to object again to non-responsive.
It's a question and answer.
Ranger Armstrong, as you visited on numerous occasions, the first time you went, you didn't see any readily available visual indicators. What, as you eventually found, were the only visual indicators of what garage floor you're on?
On the instep, or on the frame of each elevator, there is a small black placard that has the level number on it. And as I drove by, I would look for that placard, and it would display what garage level you were on. That was the only visual indicator that I had.
And is that something you had to be looking for?
Yes.
And did you ever park on the wrong floor?
Yes.
Just in the course of your investigation, you unintentionally parked on the wrong floor?
I did.
With regard to going from the garage to the interior of the complex, what visual indicators are there to let someone know what floor they're on?
There are none.
So walking into the entryway, there's nothing readily apparent or available to let you know what floor you're on, correct?
At that time, no.
Have you been back since this incident or since your investigation, and have they made changes to the labeling of each the entryways from the garage to each entrance to indicate what floor you're on?
Yes, they have.
And what were those changes?
It was a placard with a number on it that indicated which level you were on.
But at the time, on September 6th, that wasn't there, correct?
That's correct.
Now, each elevator had a number on it on the inside of the frame, is that correct?
That's correct.
And there was a fire escape, some type of placard to the left of the elevator that had a small number on it, correct?
That's correct.
Other than that, there was no other visual indicators of what floor you're on, correct?
There's a red placard for reserved spaces I don't know how many spaces there are, but they're very close to the elevators. And for instance, if it said parking space 419, I learned that the first digit correlated or corresponded to the parking garage level you were on. And I developed that on subsequent visits to the apartment complex.
It's been discussed that Ms. Guyger drove a white Dodge truck. We've seen the videos of that coming into the garage on that evening of September 6th, correct?
Correct.
And based on your investigation, was it determined that she parked the Dodge truck on the 4th floor and backed in facing the entrance into the apartment complex?
Yes.
We could draw up State's Exhibit 170. And does that show Ms. Guyger's truck?
Yes, it does.
And that's backed into the one of the spots there at the Southside Flats.
Yes, sir.
And then if we go to State's Exhibit 175, and does that show from the driver's side of the Dodge Ram truck to the entryway I'm going to press a button and hopefully the TV doesn't. Where that arrow is pointing, is that the entryway to the apartment complex?
Yes, it is.
And to the, if someone walks directly from their car, from the Dodge Ram truck to the entryway, without looking at the elevator, and without doing a 360 turn to look at to see if the skyline's showing and things like that, if they're just focused and walk directly towards that entrance, there's nothing around that entrance that would indicate what floor you're on, correct?
That's correct.
May I approach the witness room?
Yes.
Ranger, I'm going to show you what's been marked as Defense Exhibits 53 through 62, and ask you if you recognize those as photos from the 3rd floor from the parking garage down the hallways leading up to apartment 1378.
Yes, they do.
And then I'm going to show you what's been marked as Defendant's Exhibits 44 through 52 and ask you if those fairly accurately represent the entryway from the garage into the apartment complex on the 4th floor and down the hallways leading to apartment 1478.
Yes, they do.
At this point, I'll offer Defendant's Exhibits 44 through 62.
These were the photographs taken by the Dallas Police Department, where the Rangers Department investigation. That representation I know to be not been I have no objection.
I can't hear you, sir.
Oh, I'm sorry. I have no objection to 44 through 52 the representation. These were taken by the Dallas Police Department.
Get all over one there. Okay.
With respect to State's Exhibit number 53, or Defense 53 through 62,
You have no objection to anything, so photographs or defense exhibits 44 through 62 will be admitted.
Ranger Armstrong, I'm going to show you Defendant's Exhibit 44. Well, it's Defendant's Exhibit 46. It shows the entranceway into the fourth floor. And there's, when these photos were taken, there's a scooter that's resting the door open, but to your knowledge, that scooter had no evidentiary significance, or there's no indication it was there on the evening of September 6th.
I don't recall if it was there the night before or not, but it didn't have any evidentiary significance to us.
So Defendant's Exhibit 44 is the entryway into the fourth floor. And does that show the perspective of just someone looking at that entryway and just focusing on that entryway?
Yes, it does.
And this is 53, that's the third floor, close to the same perspective, correct?
That's correct.
And if we put them right next to each other, when you're focusing just on that entryway, there's no major differences, correct?
That's correct.
The sun might shine differently on the fourth floor than the third floor. If you're looking, you might look to your left or right and notice things that are about the level of the building that are different. But if you're just focused on going from the entranceway into the hallway, there's no readily apparent indicators of what floor you're on, correct?
That's correct.
Since that time, they put numbers, clear numbers next to the entryway.
They have.
And then, can't really see 45. This is the elevator to the right of the third floor. And is this placard contains a small number that if you went over and you looked at it, you could tell what floor you're on?
Yes.
And then on the inside of the door frame, facing inward, several inches high, there's a number that correlates with the floor, correct?
That's correct.
Other than that, when you're walking in, if you don't go over here and look at it, then you don't know what floor you're on as far as from visual indicators.
Correct. Minus that red placard if it's not blocked by a vehicle. Talking about that.
This will show what, if you walked around here, you could see a reserved spot.
That's correct.
And if you were parked in one of the reserved spots, then you would actually be actively looking for that.
That's correct.
And then Defendant's Exhibit 46 is the entrance into the fourth floor next to Defendant's Exhibit 46 is the entrance into the fourth floor, and 55 is the entrance into the third floor. And outside, if the scooter wasn't there, it's the exact same design of the entryway, correct?
That's correct.
Defendant's Exhibit 47 is the view from the entryway to the fourth floor hallway. And then Defendant's Exhibit 56 is a view from walking from the garage entryway to the to the third floor. And are these very similar?
Yes, they are.
Now, where are the numbers on the doorways? Or where are the numbers to indicate what floor you're on?
If you look on that mirrored glass to the left of each door frame, that's correct, there's several banks of LED lights, and the numbers indicating the apartment number are between the top and second bank of the LEDs.
And if you're just walking at eye level, you'd have to look up and specifically look to make out those numbers, correct?
Yes,
Now there's, tenants have the option of putting out floor mats, so there might be different floor mats on floor 3 than there are on floor 4, if you're looking for that, correct?
that's correct.
As we continue down the hallway, this is floor 4, and this is the third floor. And again, unless you're noticing that there's a pineapple floor mat or some type of brown floor mat, you're not going to notice unless you look up to the apartment number, correct?
That's correct.
As you get closer to each apartment on Defendant's Exhibit 50, the 1470A is on the other side of this column, is that correct?
That's correct.
And Defendant's Exhibit 58, 1378 is right on the other side of this column, correct?
That's correct.
And as we get closer, coming down the fourth floor hallway, we see 1478 on the other side. And if you're looking, you could see the red mat protruding slightly from the other side of the column, but it's not, you don't see it until you're right up on it, correct?
That's correct.
And this is the similar view to 1378.
That's correct.
And if you're looking at eye level, there's absolutely no difference, correct?
Correct.
And then as we approach the apartments from eye level, this is apartment 1478, is that correct?
That's correct.
And that's Defendant's Exhibit 52. Defendant's Exhibit 61 shows apartment 1378. So if you're just from eye level, it's the exact same unless you look up and to the left to the apartment number. Correct?
That's correct.
But if you're focusing on just the doorway and the putting your key fob in, there's no reason to look up or to the left, and there's nothing on the door or in the doorway that indicates what door number you're in.
That's correct.
Was that the layout of the apartments and the tremendous amount of similarities, was that significant to your investigation?
Yes, it was.
Did you direct a team to interview tenants to investigate whether this was a common problem as far as parking on the wrong floors, walking to the wrong apartment, or putting your key into the wrong apartment door.
Yes, I did.
And in that, did you, the Rangers, with the assistance of Department of Public Safety, CID, detectives, and other law enforcement members, try to knock on every door and interview every tenant in our apartment complex?
Yes, we did.
And you weren't able to, some people didn't want to be interviewed, some apartments are vacant, and, some people just never responded, correct?
That's correct.
About how many people did you interview?
We interviewed 297 of the 349 residents that are on the rolls for Southside Flats Apartments.
And of those, how many on all floors had walked to the wrong apartment on the wrong floor and put their key in the door?
Of all floors,
Yes.
that would be 15%.
So about 46
That's correct.
individuals, and then was it a higher percentage of just the individuals that lived on floors 3 and 4?
Yes, it was.
And how many were on, what was the percentage on floors 3 and 4?
For
For placing their key in the wrong door?
22%, 23% had done that.
So that was 38 individuals who lived on floors 3 and 4, had unintentionally walked to the wrong apartment on the wrong floor and got their key fob all the way in.
That's correct.
With regard to just walking to the wrong apartment on the wrong floor unintentionally, did you have 92 or 31% of the tenants total on all floors had done that?
That's correct.
And with regard to unintentionally walking to the wrong apartment on the wrong floor, did you have 71 tenants on floors 3 and 4, approximately, 44% of the tenants on floors 3 and 4 have responded affirmatively that they've done that?
That's correct.
And with regard to tenants that had unintentionally parked on the wrong floor, and 93 or 32% of the totals in floors 1 through 4 had done that,
Yes.
and 76 or 47% of floors 3 and 4 had done that.
Correct. That's correct.
Was that significant to your investigation?
Absolutely.
With regard to the door frame of apartment 1478, did you, in your investigation, find for lack of a better term, a structural flaw that caused the door to occasionally not latch all the way?
Yes.
Can you explain that to the jurors?
Yes, in reviewing the crime scene photos, I observed that the strike plate, which is where the bolt goes in to catch and secure the door, the curved part of it, which the throw kind of brushes against to go into the actual hole, it was bowed out. And when I looked further at that it's called a strike plate, I looked inside where the throw goes, and I could see a crack in line with the screws that had been driven into the door frame. It appeared that those screws had been over-torqued into the doorway, causing that strike plate to bow out, which I believe would cause the throw, as the door would sweep shut, it would cause the throw to create more drag, slowing it down and making it possible for the door to not close all the way.
Ranger Armstrong, we're showing you defendants' exhibits 39 through 43, then please ask you to look at those. And do defendants' exhibits 39 through 43 show photos taken of this issue with the strike plates that you were discussing?
Yes, it does.
And do they fairly and accurately depict those?
Yes, they do.
Offer defendants 39 through 43. And Ranger Armstrong,
I think you can touch on it.
touch on the screen. There we go.
Okay.
Okay. So if you can go through what you saw in the strike plates with the jurors with using the photo.
Sure. So what I was referring to is the strike plate. It's going to be this metal piece in the door frame here, the one that's closest to the floor. And you can see that it's not perfectly vertical. It would be, I could try to tell you where that crack inside the door frame is, but you can't see it on this photo. But you can see there's a small amount of curvature, right? I can't make it that fine, but right about there where that door plate begins to bow out, and it's deeper into the wood than it should be.
And I'm going to show you defendants in 40. And again, can you point that out on this photo?
Sure. So this is the strike plate again, and right about here is where the top of that strike plate begins to bow out, and you can see right here there are I guess tool marks, for lack of a better term, from the throw brushing against the strike plate as it sweeps closed.
And then defendants in 41, does that show closer of this issue?
Yes, it does. So if you look right here at the wood on the bottom part of the strike plate, it's exposed because that bottom of the strike plate is driven too far into the door frame. And if you look right here, the gap between the wood and the strike plate is displayed because these screws were torqued in to the point where it bowed the metal out into the area where the door throw would sweep.
And defendants 42, this is the door. Do we see kind of the same, the tool marks or the evidence of it striking up against that?
Yes.
Did you perform an experiment, for lack of a better term, with the district attorney's office where you went to 1478 and you let the door close when it was kind of the conditions were similar to September 6th as far as humidity and rain? Did you conduct an experiment to see if the door would not fully latch if it was just let go of?
Yes.
And tell us what you saw and what you experienced with that.
So we opened the door a series of times from different distances, from completely open and halfway open and somewhere in between. On multiple occasions, the door would close all the way, and the door would also not completely close, depending on the distance. And we were just letting go of the door, not using any force. And sometimes it would close all the way, sometimes it wouldn't. It depended on the distance.
And when it didn't close all the way, what was an example of a distance where it was let go of and it didn't close all the way?
Approximately halfway open, enough for somebody to be standing between the non-hinged side of the door frame and in the doorway.
So enough for you to fit through?
Yes.
And so from that distance, it would, not every time, but there was an occasion at least where it would let to close on its own it didn't fully latch.
That's correct.
And yesterday we watched the video with Ranger Daniel. There was a video that we watched yesterday where you, and I think it was called Daniel, Ranger Daniel took the video
Yes, sir.
of 1478, and it was just documenting the crime scene as it existed, 2 days later.
That's correct. Yes, sir.
And in that video, we can go to 803. All right, come back to that. We'll stop it there. So Ranger Armstrong, the condition of the door there, is it closed but not fully latched?
Yes, that's correct. It is.
And was there anything keeping it in that position other than the fact that the door didn't fully latch?
No, sir. Just the throw is resting on the strike plate, and it's not completely latched.
And so if you're on the other side of that door and you just pushed it open, if you just pushed on it, it would open, correct?
That's correct. It would.
You can keep one. So we see on the video the condition of the door when it doesn't latch fully, correct?
That's correct.
And that's a part of 1478.
Correct.
Just to be clear, from the video, that's not the day he did the experiment, correct?
That's correct. It's not.
but it had rained. It had rained on September 6th, and so you wanted to, when you did the experiment, it was a day sometime in September that had a similar amount of rain or humidity. Is that correct?
It actually may have been in October, but it was sometime. But the weather conditions were very similar to that of September 6th.
So the experiment, when you did the experiment, that was in October, but it left the door in a similar condition as we saw on the Ranger Daniel video of 1478. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes, sir.
Judge, go here first.
Yes. The first on food, I want to see a small portion of that as it relates to our discussion. So can you cue that up for me?
Do you know which part you want me?
Yeah, right after they hit the stairs and right when they get to the apartment. Oh, I'm sorry. Ranger.
You ready, Judge?
Yes, I'm ready. Nothing was wrong yet.
You gotta change the page to Yes. Actually, I cannot be because it's when everyone was now you're on?
Yes.
Let's start it again, Judge, I'm sorry.
What's fine?
Start CPR. Yeah. Come on, Chief. Let me know if you need to switch. Clear my way. Mark 143, you have here on the right, correct? Mark 143, you do have here on the right, correct?
That's correct.
Come on, Chief.
Can you back it up about 10 seconds?
Keep going. Keep going. I'm switching. He's reading. Come on, Chief. 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 Look at this counter. See if he got any first aid. Look at this bathroom and underneath this counter. Hold pressure on him. Hold pressure on him. Oh, we're going to do it. We got it.
You say pause? Yeah, back it up just a little bit and pause. I'll tell you when to pause. Pause it. Continue to get affirmations. Okay, start it again, please. Okay. Are we back on the record? Let's see.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, I didn't even give any thought to the victim's family, the alleged victim's family being here. My recollection of what I had seen on, I'm not quite sure what state's exhibit that is.
States Exhibit 6.
Is what I thought it was. And so, in response to your question, Mr. Rogers, as to whether or not the court will allow Ranger Armstrong to give his opinion as to where Mr. John was allegedly shot, the court will not allow that to be done because the court is not satisfied that there is sufficient evidence to demonstrate where his shoes were and that those shoes were never moved or contacted by persons attempting to give or to render aid to him immediately after this incident. Is there anything else?
Judge, if I request to make an offer of proof on all the opinions I'd like to elicit from Ranger Armstrong for the record.
Yes.
Ranger Armstrong, in addition to the training and background that we've gone through, how many homicides or shootings have you investigated, either as the lead investigator or as the assistant investigator?
It would be between 50 to 100. I don't have a hard number. It's many.
And are you trained in the processing of crime scenes?
I am.
And what's your training in that?
It's our basic crime scene school that all Rangers go through. It's a 3-week school put on by senior Rangers from our actual crime scene team. And they are also certified from the National Forensics Academy out of Tennessee, which is a 10-week course.
And have you gone through shooting reconstruction school?
I have.
And describe that for the judge.
That is a week-long school that will show you the different characteristics, the different behaviors, and the different types of evidence that you will find from different types of shootings, from different types of guns, from different types of ammunition and calibers, and also the objects that those bullets strike or may go through to strike its final resting place. We are also trained during that course in establishing a approximate trajectory and flight path for those gunshots, and we also learn what gunshots are capable of doing and the methodology behind establishing those results when we do flight path trajectory and look at bullet strikes on different materials.
And does that include wound tracks and wound paths and the types of gunshot wounds to individuals and the reactions to those gunshots?
Yes, sir, to an extent.
With regard to, did you make conclusions as to where you believed the complaining witness was standing or was located in the apartment when he was shot?
Yes, I did.
And what was your conclusion?
Approximately in the video where you see the first officer come in, you see his sandals, I believe, right in that immediate area where his sandals are laying and the bottom of his feet are pointing. We believe that he was standing in that location when he was shot.
And is that 13 to 15 feet from the center of the entryway into the apartment?
Yes, it is.
And tell the judge what you based that opinion on.
I based that opinion on Ranger Michael Adcock used our Leica scanner, which is a laser device that is used to measure those trajectories. When measuring the bullet defect in the wall and tracing that trajectory back, it was at a certain angle or a certain degree that placed the second shot in that area that I just described where Mr. John was. Also, the first bullet was in the first gunshot was also in that approximate area when Ranger Adcock measured those trajectories.
And do you also take into account the totality of the evidence that you find at the scene, the location of blood, the location of the body on the body cams, the location of the casings, all the physical evidence?
Absolutely.
And the results of the autopsy?
Yes.
And based on that, your opinion is, and based on your training and experience, that the evidence and the Leica scan shows that supports your opinion that Mr. John, the complaining witness, was standing 13 to 15 feet from the doorway when he was shot.
Yes, that's correct.
With regard to your training and experience, have you responded to numerous calls, burglary calls, domestic violence calls, all kinds of calls as a trooper or even as a ranger?
Yes, I have.
Based on your investigation, do you believe that Amber Guyger was responding to a burglary call when she acted, when she pulled her firearm or when she entered that apartment? When she entered 1478, was Amber Guyger responding to a burglary call?
Yes, I believe that was her perception.
Well, prior to getting there, did she have any idea, based on the evidence, was she aware that there was an intruder or what she believed to be someone in 1478?
Based on the door being ajar?
When she opened the door,
Yes.
she believed she was dealing with an intruder. Is that your belief?
Yes, it is.
Is that different than responding to a burglary call when you were called and you have a time to formulate a plan on the way to the scene?
Yes.
In other words, when you get dispatched to a burglary call, it's different than walking into a burglary in progress, correct?
Yes, correct.
And so would you expect her reactions to have to be more immediate than you would when you have time to formulate a plan?
Yes.
Would it be reasonable for her to address the immediate, what she perceived as the immediate threat in that apartment at that time?
Yes.
In your opinion, did she have the luxury of time to call for cover or find concealment?
No, sir.
Ranger Armstrong, you've been in SWAT, you've been a ranger, you've investigated numerous officer-involved shootings. Can you describe, based on your training and your experience, your personal experience as well, and your investigative experience, what physical sensations you're experiencing and you've seen other officers experience when involved in a tense, rapidly evolving encounter with the suspect?
Based on my training and my experience, physically, your heart rate goes very, very high. Your vision becomes narrowed, which is commonly referred to as tunnel vision. You begin to think very, very quickly, and because your vision is narrowing, you begin to concentrate on what you believe your threat is. You narrowly concentrate on that threat. And that's due to blood rushing to the major organs of the body because your body's saying that I need to do this right now, which is either fight or flight.
Is that that's based on the schools you've gone to, as well as your personal experience, as well as interviewing officers that have been in these same situations?
Yes, sir.
Ranger Armstrong, based on your the crime scene and your full investigation, did you have any evidence that the complaining witness was sitting on the couch when he was shot?
No, sir, I do not.
After completing the investigation, and now there was an arrest warrant on September 9th, I believe, correct, for manslaughter?
That's correct.
Had you finished your investigation at that time?
No, sir, I had not.
After finishing your investigation and looking at the totality of the circumstances and considering everything, do you believe today that you have probable cause to believe that Amber Guyger committed a crime?
Based on the totality of the circumstances, based on the complete investigation, no, sir.
Do you have an opinion as to whether it was reasonable for Amber Guyger to have believed she was in her apartment when she encountered the complaining witness?
Yes, I do.
And what is that opinion?
That she believed that there was a burglar in her apartment.
And that it was reasonable?
Yes.
And do you have an opinion as to whether it was reasonable for Amber Guyger to perceive, based on the facts and circumstances, that from her standpoint, that the complaining witness was an intruder in her apartment?
Yes, sir.
And what is your opinion?
That it was a reasonable perception.
And do you have an opinion as to whether it was reasonable, based on the facts and circumstances, from an ordinary, prudent person in Amber Guyger's position, for her to perceive that Botham Jean was a deadly threat?
Yes, sir.
And what is that opinion?
I believe that she did perceive him as a deadly threat.
And you believe that was reasonable based on your training and your experience and your consideration of the totality of the circumstances?
Yes, sir.
As an investigator, that's what you have to do. You have to look at the entire full picture of evidence when you're making a decision not only whether to arrest someone or whether to send them to prison, correct?
That's correct.
And today you're telling us that based on everything and based on your training and experience, you don't believe there's even probable cause that Amber Guyger committed any crime, correct?
That's correct.
And do you have an opinion as to whether Amber Guyger was reckless or criminally negligent when she parked on the 4th floor, when she walked to apartment 1478, when she entered apartment 1478, and when she encountered the complaining witness, perceived him as a deadly threat, and shot him?
No, I don't believe that it was reckless or criminally negligent based on the totality of the investigation and the circumstances and facts.
And Judge, those are the opinions that I would proffer for Ranger Armstrong.
I'm assuming, Mr. Herman, you'd like to put your objection on record?
Yes, ma'am, I do. I'd like to, I would object. First and foremost, I think it's inappropriate even for a qualified expert to be testifying as to what they believe the state of mind of the defendant was at the time of the commission of the offense. That's number one. Even a qualified expert isn't allowed to do that in the state of Texas. Secondarily, what Ranger Armstrong believes is Ranger Armstrong's opinion. That's his belief. His opinion and belief doesn't help the jury, which is exactly why an expert opinion on some things might be relevant. The fact that he believes something based on evidence doesn't mean that the jury is going to believe the same thing. And all it would do, since he can't help them, his opinion doesn't help them form their opinion. All it would do is serve to confuse them and possibly even override their individual assessment as the exclusive judges of the facts and the evidence because of his station as a Texas Ranger. So I believe that it's inappropriate not only because it violates him trying to tell the jury what she believed, but also, even if it was just what he believed, he's not helpful to the jury, and therefore they don't need that level of any expertise on what Ranger Armstrong believes. So I believe it's inappropriate.
Of course, go ahead, Mr. Ryan.
Judge, just briefly, he's not testifying to her state of mind. He's testifying as to his opinion of the reasonableness of her actions. And Mr. Hermes is putting that into play by implying that she acted not in accordance with DPD policy in responding to a burglary call, that she ignored all these cues that she should have seen, and that she, and specifically putting into evidence that, telling this jury that the complaining witness was sitting on his couch when he was shot. He's made all these viable issues, and they rely on Ranger Armstrong and other law enforcement officers for these opinions and all their other cases, and detectives and investigators have been allowed to testify, if they're qualified, to their opinion as to reasonableness, pursuant to Rule 704, based on their training and their experience. And so, Judge, and then I'd like to carve out, I threw in the questions about his experience with tunnel vision. I'd like to carve that out as well, because I don't want that lumped in with all the opinion onto the reasonableness. So there's
Help me to understand what you mean by carving it out.
well, so I'd like to offer the opinions and testimony that Ranger Armstrong, that I listed for Ranger Armstrong regarding, based on his training, his experience individually in interviewing officers and going to schools, of what an officer, what he experienced and what he's seen officers experience when they're confronted with a tense, rapidly evolving encounter with a suspect. And that's where he talked about what you go through and how you have the narrowing of the vision. And then I have the issue with whether the difference between responding to a burglary call and walking to a burglary, and then, so those are two different issues, and then all the opinions with regard to where the complaining witness was located and the reasonableness of Ms. Guyger's.
Was Ranger Armstrong Crawford by you to the state as an expert in these areas?
He's on my list of experts, Judge.
No, that's not what she has the opposite.
Well, I didn't.
We've never designated Ranger Armstrong as an expert.
Oh, I'm sorry. I misunderstood, Judge. The question I answered was, we proffered him as an expert. They did not. I'm sorry.
Well, my ruling remains the same. I will not allow Ranger Armstrong to testify as to the location of Mr. John when he was shot. I will not allow him to offer testimony concerning the reasonableness of Ms. Guyger's actions. And I will not allow him to testify concerning how he knows for certain where Mr. John was when he was shot. Because I think based on all the evidence that we have, I don't know that determination can be made. There are a number of people in that crime scene. I looked back because my recollection was that there were people standing between his legs at one point in time offering aid to him. So I don't know if we can rely on the photographs that show where his flip-flops were to indicate exactly where he was at the time that he was struck by the bullet. Nor do I believe that we can determine from the trajectory of the bullet in the wall which bullet was fired first or second. So I'm not going to allow that testimony. Are we ready to proceed?
Judge, just with the tunnel vision, am I allowed to
He's
go?
not on the stand right now as an expert. I guess we could go through qualifying. Is he on your witness list as a witness?
He's on my witness list, expert witness list.
Your Honor,
We gotta have a 7:05 hearing. If we were gonna do all that, we should have had that before we got started. We'll finish this cross. You can do with your case what you will when we get to your part of the case. Mr. Rogers, you may continue your cross-examination.
Armstrong, I want to show you State's Exhibit 140. And in I don't know what caused that, but
The P erase.
here. These cones, if you can mark and show the cones 1 and 2, what do those reflect?
Each of these reflects a shell casing.
And describe to the members of the jury what a shell casing is and how it's relevant to an investigation.
The shell casing is what holds the gunpowder, which is the propellant for the projectile, which is the rounded nose that you see coming from a bullet. And a shell casing is ejected from a semi-automatic weapon every time the trigger is pulled, as long as it's functioning reliably. Depending on the make and model of the gun, depending on the ammunition, it will eject in a certain pattern. And that's basically it.
And those casings, are they very light? Like the bullet gets ejected out of them, and it gets ejected from the gun. Where they're on the ground on States Exhibit 1 and 2, does that necessarily mean that's exactly where they fell?
No, not at all.
And tell the jurors what are some variables that can affect where you find casings and based on your training and your experience.
There are a lot of conditions that will factor into where a shell casing lands. First of all, the surface that it lands on, whether it's hard, soft, wet. Also, what it hits when it lands. It can also hit the actual person that shot the gun, and it can take a different path from its initial path. They can also be stepped on at crime scenes, or if it's on the street, they can be run over or stepped on and caught in the lugs of a boot or the tread of a tire. There's a lot of different variables that exist when a shell casing is ejected that will affect its final resting place.
And based on the body cam footage, just preservation of life always comes first. There was officers and paramedics walking in and around that area that could have affected the location of the casings.
Yes, that's correct. We'll show you what the March's Defendants Exhibit 63 and 64. And I know you didn't take these photos, and it was actually the DAs that took these photos, but does that look like the key fob?
Judge, I'll stipulate, and I have no objection.
All right.
62 and 64.
63 and 64. So this is apartment 1478. Does that show how high the key fob is based on the measurements taken?
Yes, it does.
And what is that?
Looks like 3 feet, 7 inches tall.
So for the math repair, 42 to 43 inches?
Correct.
And that's been 63, and around this location here is where the key fob is placed, correct?
That's correct.
Q States Exhibit 98. And States Exhibit 98, does that appear to be the keys of Amber Guyger as they were placed in the locking mechanism of 1478?
Yes, it does.
Ranger Armstrong, based on your investigation and was it consistent that these shots happened in quick succession?
Yes, sir.
Based on ear witnesses and the descriptions of what they heard, correct?
That's correct.
I'll pass the witness.
I have nothing else. Thank you, Judge.
Thank you, excuse.
Objection can stay.
Judge, we're going to possibly recall, so subject to recall.
Ranger, please make yourself available.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Carter, you